Right now, let's turn our attention to Anjem Choudary, a man who this man, as I said, he's been in the news ever since I've been a journalist. He's our most notorious hate preachers. Well done, us. Annoyingly born and bred here, therefore we can't get rid of him, which would be the obvious solution. But Anjem Choudary was sentenced to 5 years prison in 2016 for inviting support for Islamic State. Then, of course, he was released from Belmarsh halfway through his sentence in 2018. He did, though, have strict licence conditions, including a ban on using the internet, and within 3 weeks of those terms lapsing at the end of what should have been his prison sentence in 2021, he started pumping out press releases on social media, and then he started, according to an unprecedented investigation, basically recruiting followers in Brazil, Canada and the US. His lectures are basically aimed at any children, young people upwards, basically calling on them to sort of preach jihadist views. He has spawned beheadings and bomb plots around the world. What on earth was he doing free on our streets to do that? Let's talk about this with Dr. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Good morning to you.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. I mean, I don't know how many times we're going to have somebody who was caught, for some terror offence of some sort, inciting terrorism, and then goes to jail, serves half their sentence, amazingly, miraculously comes out totally unchanged and gets back to it straight away. How many times are we going to allow this to happen?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? How many times are we going to allow it to happen? Because in the case of Anjem Choudary, it was always obvious that he was going to reoffend. I mean, his involvement with jihadism was so intense for the period of his sort of activity, his political and sort of religious activity, that there was no chance of him being de-radicalised. And I think he laughed in the face of such attempts. Yeah. And it was obvious he was going to come back. And therefore, why would you allow him, sort of carte blanche to be able to go out there and do it? And yet we did.
And many people were saying, it took years to actually put him behind bars the first time. And then when he was released, many were saying he was too dangerous to be released. I thought the 5-year sentence in the first place was a joke. Letting him out after 2.5 years, even more of a joke. Having these licence rules, only to the end of the 5 years, but off you go. Now, he was clever enough to not carry on the same job here in the UK, but effectively to go online and basically try and recruit jihadists and jihadist support in other countries around the world. Luckily, he was being monitored. But here's the thing. Why are we monitoring these people rather than keeping them behind bars? And why are our sentences so ludicrously low, let alone letting people out halfway through, which I consider to be absurd for any crime of any sort, whether it's shoplifting or terrorism. But why have we got ourselves into such a mess on this that we're not willing to stand up to these people when we know they want to kill us and they are trying to recruit other people to kill us?
Well, Julia, it's a very good question, isn't it? And it's now up to the new government to decide what they would like to do about this issue in general.
Oh, good. I feel very reassured by that.
Well, the previous government didn't do that much, if you think about it, in terms of kind of changing the setup for hard nut cases like this. And I think there has to be obviously it's obviously a case by case look at people. I mean, it is possible to de-radicalise people. That certainly
doesn't seem to happen very often.
Well, it doesn't happen when it comes to people who are steeped in ideology. It is very difficult to get someone who is lost in an ideology that ultimately says that God has determined this. Yeah. It becomes very difficult for a human to intercede at that point if you think that God has told you to be a jihadist. So it really is about monitoring people very carefully and subject them to stringent tests. And if someone emerges out of prison, look, we can't hold people forever, although I do think the tariff should increase. But if they do emerge out of prison, not de-radicalised and obviously going to reoffend, well, they need to be subject to very much stricter sanctions.
I mean, if you have to monitor them and say they can't be on the internet, isn't that a clue? I mean, isn't that maybe a clue that you don't think that they're safe? It's quite bizarre, isn't it?
It is, but at the same time, Julia, we can't keep people locked up forever on the premise that they might not be safe. Well, I don't think we can. I think that would be a sort of problem for civil liberties. What we can, though, do, what we certainly can... What
about the civil liberties of the people who get beheaded?
I would agree with you,
blown
but
up?
the way to deal with that is to ensure that those who do come out, if they're, and again, I stress we should be increasing tariffs on hard nut cases, not decreasing them. They should bring in a new classification of people like Choudary quite clearly and, make it obvious that these are not communal guard. Nobody did a mistake here. He didn't just fall into an accident.
Even if they're not wielding the knife themselves, these are dangerous people. They're going to believe that these people, he inspired, some, key terror attacks.
Many.
But I mean, this is the key thing. What you talked about some people who can be de-radicalised, and I can understand you get people. And again, I think he was kept separate from the normal range, the population in behind bars because of the fear that he would radicalise people. And we know that they often, the Islamist radicals, they try and target, young men behind bars, perhaps drugs, perhaps some mental health problems, but failed by society, and these people are very easy to radicalise, very easy to drag into this world. What radicalised Anjem Choudary? Do we know what his route into this was?
Well, it's a long and twisted one. I mean, he's been doing this for 30 years, so it's the usual route of add in a dash of religion, add in a dash of grievance policy, add in a dash of some of the international events that were occurring at the time that he was able to latch onto and sort of call to be the focuses of what his attention were. But ultimately, I think it was perhaps less about that and more about his idea of power, that he wanted to be the mastermind behind all of these things. And in a way, it was quite pathetic when he was caught in this latest sting operation. You see him complaining to others, saying that he can't get his power back. Things have become very hard for him. So you can see in his case, I know, dear, but you can see in his case, it was clearly a genuine belief, but also he did enjoy being, if you like, the sort of the power behind the throne.
And just finally, how many other Anjem Choudharys are there in the UK?
Well, here's the problem. The problem is that numbers have increased, not decreased, right? Wouldn't you say? This is the issue. When Anjem Choudary first came onto the scene, this was very much a minority pursuit. People, he became famous, him and, the hook-handed...
Abu Hamza.
And all those people, because, frankly, we'd never seen anything of that kind before. Well, now, unfortunately, if you've seen what's happened, in British politics, let alone in other cases, a huge radicalisation has occurred. We've seen the sectarian voting that occurred at the last general election. We've seen, sort of people being pulled up on terrorist charges even during the last election. And so, as a result, it is very concerning that there may be a conveyor belt of these people. And clearly what's happening is that integration is failing in this way, and we are not clamping down on extremism the way we should do. And I'm afraid, Julie, the effects will be very damaging for this country.
Absolutely.